Good evening, everybody. It's 7 p.m. in NYC and 4 p.m. near Lake Sonoma in Sonoma County, California. I'm Sam Kimball from Crush Wine Experiences, formerly New York Wine Events. Thank you for joining us on virtual day trip to wine country presented by Citi. We are here to hear about the formation of a new AVA, which stands for American Viticultural Area, and some amazing grapevines and new wines that are coming out. You might ask, what is an AVA? Well, you came to the right place. I'm going to tell you about that. An American Viticultural Area is when a U.S. winery wants to tell you the geographic origin of its wine. It uses a tag on the wine bottle called an appellation of origin. And appellations are defined either by political boundaries, like a town or a county, a state, a country, or federally recognized regions called American Viticultural Areas, hence the AVA. And there's more. In order for a wine to be designated with an appellation or origin of origin or an AVA defined by a political boundary, such as a country or a county, federal law requires that 75% or more of the grapes used to make that wine be from that appellation. And finally, that wine has to be fully finished, bottled, labeled within the state which the county of the AVA, the appellation, is located. So we're going to the Rockpile AVA, an amazing place in Northern California, within Sonoma County. And as you may know from the title of tonight's session, which is Making the Dream of a Rockpile Appellation Become a Reality in California, this is a relatively new AVA within the last 20 years. And our theme is high elevation grapes that are in a slightly cooler climate. And what that means is wine that is refreshing and full-bodied, red wines that are fantastic for pairing with food. We're going to meet Jack Florence of Florence Vineyard. Jack is somewhat of an iconic character and figure in the wine industry in California, and you'll see why. Very interesting guy, and one of the people who really was the driving force behind the creation of this amazing AVA or appellation called Rockpile. It's located in a quiet, rugged, mountainous no man's land above Lake Sonoma, on a good road just 20 minutes from the Dry Creek Valley, which is a much more famous part of the Sonoma wine country. Wines from Florence Vineyard were named number 3 among the best wines in the world in 2003 by the Wine Spectator, and that's a very big deal. Back then, the vineyard was called the Rockpile Road Vineyard. And tonight, this is special. We will be among the first people ever to learn about 2 brand new wines that have not yet hit the market. They will be bottled and for sale by the summer of 2022. And lastly, we will be among the first people to have the chance to get on the pre-order wish list for those wines when they become available next year. And tonight, Jack Florence, the vineyard owner and winemaker and founder, will be sampling the wines that we're talking about and that will be on sale next year. He'll be doing barrel samples and talking about the tasting notes and where they are in the progression of being made. And he's pulled those samples from the barrels in which those wines are currently aging. So what's the backstory on Florence Vineyard? I like to do the quick version. Boy is born and raised in Southern California, follows his father into the wine business, takes a drive as a young man to the Rockpile area up in northern Sonoma there, which was remote at the time and still is. Young man finds some property and buys it in 1992, approximately 30 years ago. And he then meets some big wigs, some big macas in the California wine business, and starts growing and selling grapes to them and the rest is history. The awards came, the Wine Spectator came, and the Rockpile appellation was eventually and officially established 10 years on in 2002. The stats are that when Jack first started in 1992, there were 2 small vineyards and less than 100 acres of vines. Today, there are over 12 vineyards and several hundred acres of vines. The secret is getting out about the Rockpile appellation, or the Rockpile AVA. Most of the grape growing in Rockpile is Zinfandel. There's some Petite Sirah. And I just want to say welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Please hit us with questions and comments in the chat, and we will address those on the fly as we go during the session. And also, if you would, hit the chat right now and tell us where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to know where you're at. This evening, we're going to that Rockpile area in the far-flung part of Geyserville, California. It's technically in the town of Geyserville. And I want to say hello to North Carolina, New Jersey, Washington State. Wow, San Francisco. Awesome. Great to see all you guys. Let's take a look at exactly where we are headed. I'm going to do a wide shot behind me here in the background of California, the coast, and you will see down towards the bottom of the screen, sort of off from my shoulder, there is San Francisco, and you have to go all the way up north there and find Lake Sonoma, which is a man-made lake. They dammed up a very deep sort of valley and created a lake decades ago. And we're up high on a mountainside there. And if we zoom in, you'll see the map pin, and you can see the lake much more clearly there in my background. It's an absolutely beautiful area. Even though it's only a couple hours from San Francisco, it is pretty remote. And we're in for a treat when we talk to our guest, Jack. You're going to see where he is in the vineyard, which is very fun and is a great vantage point. One more thing, and then we're going to bring our guest on. I would like to show real quick here a video of the area. It's very fun to see, what happens and what the landscape looks like. So bear with me one sec. I am going to share my screen, and we will show a very brief video that previews this wonderful part of the world. So bear with me a moment. Pull it up here, and bear with me a second, and we will share this. All right, here we go. So we're looking down the hillside of all these vineyards, very steep hills above Lake Sonoma, which is a reservoir, and you can see these vines have to work to live and thrive, which makes the grapes even better. You can see how high above Lake Sonoma we are here. Right now, the lake, and Jack will talk a little bit about this, is a trickle because of the major drought that's happening in California. There it is. All right, guys. Fun to see. I want to bring on now, without further ado, our guest, Jack Florence, the founder and owner at Florence Vineyard. And Jack was the driving force behind the creation of this new Rockpile appellation, or AVA, going back 30 years ago. Welcome, Jack. It's great having you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sam. It's a pleasure. Glad to be here.
So where exactly are you? Where does this broadcast find you right now?
Well, I'm sitting out in the middle of my my vineyard, the oldest block of Zinfandel that I planted 29 years ago, and fortunate enough to live here and live and work here.
Yeah, your house is just, off camera. It's just around the corner from you.
Yeah, I have the shortest commute you could have. Yeah.
That's amazing. And you've literally been growing grapes in this very part of the world for 30 years now, after having established the AVA. What inspired you to go to Rockpile? I mean, you're from Southern California, you followed your father into the wine biz, but what inspired you to go to Rockpile and get started in this remote area 30 years ago when there was almost nothing there?
Yeah, well, I started out as doing vineyard management in Dry Creek Valley, Alexander Valley, and about the time I was getting about 30 years old, I looking for my own place, and took a drive out here one day on an ad in the paper, and just fell in love with the land. It's just so beautiful. Figured even if the vineyard didn't do well, it's an incredible place to live. So I just kind of took a flyer on it, and it just turned out great.
And you've been busy as a beaver all through those 30 years, growing grapes and working with a number of major people in the wine biz. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The reason, I guess one of the reasons the AVA or the area kind of took off as an AVA was that I had the fortune to, in my prior experience, come across some great vineyards, so that when I came to plant, I had just the right clone, and then I met up with the late Kent Rosenblum and through some other people, and started a relationship with him. I also had, for many years, my ex-business partner was the late Ulysses Valdez, and we did a lot of vineyard management together. So, and now more recently, I've had the good fortune to work with the Wilson family winery, Wilson Artisan Wines, on my wines the last 5 years.
Yeah, we've had Diane on this show talking about Wilson wines and even some Rockpile Zinfandels that they make.
Yeah, they have a vineyard out here now themselves, and in addition to that, they do a little bit for my own vineyard. In fact, they do 7 different vineyard designates just for my vineyard. So that's kind of one of the reasons that got me motivated to kind of take the next step and do one myself. In fact, they're helping me with the winemaking.
It's funny. A lot of people, including myself, don't realize how many vineyards there are and vineyard owners who don't necessarily make wine. And you've been for 30 years a pioneer in the area, but also a leading light in the world of people who grow grapes, who run vineyards, but then sell the fruit to wineries who then make the wines. But talk a little bit about that. There's a whole world that the normal wine drinking public, like people like me, don't even think about, of people who are in the vineyard biz and growing grapes and then supplying wineries, as opposed to most of us think about vineyards and wineries as, well, the winery has a vineyard. Every winery has a vineyard. Not necessarily always true.
Right. Yeah. I think wineries actually purchase a good portion of their grapes. And increasingly, it's bigger and bigger farms, but I did it for years and started with it starts out just being like production agriculture. You're just making a product and you're selling it. As you get going, it's nice to have that vineyard designate where your vineyard is recognized on the label, just that the wine came from one vineyard, and that really motivates a grower to do a much better job once you see that, your name's going to be tied to it. And then there's always the thought of, going the last step of making your own wine. And that's kind of took me a while to get around to it, but that's what I'm doing now. Yeah. But even then, it's only about 10% of my production is going into my own wine.
So still to this day, now, as you're making that transition to making your own Florence vineyard wines, you're still 90% of your crop you're selling to wineries for them to make wines.
That's right. Yeah, this year was a little bit more percentage-wise because the crop was so light. But yeah, about 10 to 20%.
We have a question from Eddie. These are the St. Peter's Church clones that were originally worked on by Ulysses Valdez and you, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I was actually a parishioner at that church way back in the 80s. And one day when I started getting into vineyard management after college, I approached the pastor and said, hey, I'll farm the vineyard. And about that time, I met up with Ulysses, and we started a long relationship in vineyard management. And then when it came time to plant my own vineyard, I figured, boy, if I ever did a Zinfandel, this would be the vineyard to take the cuttings from, because it's just a beautiful old vineyard with very little leaf roll virus. You know, a lot of times these old vineyards, they're all full of red leaves and they have virus, and this one was fairly clean. So I kind of, you know, that was I think a huge part of making Rockpile great, was having that excellent clone. And the first, you know, 4 or 5 vineyards to be planted out here, we're all from that same clone.
Right. Very interesting. Hey, can you get your camera and pan around a little bit and show everybody kind of more of where you're at right now?
I'd love to. Sure. Let me. I'll switch the camera around if I could figure out how to. Let's see.
Oh wow! Yeah.
There we go.
There it is. There it is. So we're on the top of the hill there.
That's right.
Sloping down. And is the lake about to come into view?
You know, you can't see the lake from where I am right now, but you had a better picture before, because there's not much left in it due to the drought. Hopefully we get some rain this year, but yeah, I could walk over there if you wanted. It'd take me about 5 minutes or so to get there.
Yeah,
if you like.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think it's just cool for everybody to see, you know, exactly where you are. I'm going to share my screen. So let me pull up another image here, Jack.
Sure.
By the way, another good question from Eddie. How many acres is Florence Vineyard?
I have 16 acres planted. The whole property is about 120 or so, but just 16 planted. 12 Zinfandel, 4 Petite Sirah.
Could you plant most of it? Or would that involve like a big change?
It would be difficult. Most of the easier stuff I have planted already, so it would be you know, I could do a couple maybe, but it would be difficult to do a whole lot more.
A couple other questions coming in. Has shipping grapes during the pandemic been a challenge? Shipping them?
Not really. You know, it's been something that you know, labor has always been. We've had to be careful, you know, because farm workers kind of work together, and even though I have a small crew, you know, we got everybody got vaccinated early and so forth, and but other than that, it really hasn't been much of an effect.
About what elevation is Florence Vineyard? Another question.
Yeah, I'm standing at 1,200 feet, and it ranges from about 8 to 1,200. There's an interesting thing about the AVA is that it's delineated by elevation. You have to be 800 feet and higher. So Rockpile is one of those all hillside grapes, which is one of the reasons, just a little bit of a cut above in terms of quality. Doesn't have any of the valley floor.
What's the elevation at? I'm curious to know. So, because I have a sense of how far down below you the lake is. What's the elevation of the lake?
Yeah, the lake's at 450 feet, so it's just about 1,000 feet below.
Yeah, so it's really a steep climb up from the lake to where you are.
Yeah, very steep, and you know, that just helps with grapes with the drainages. That's excellent, you know. But it's very steep, very unique terrain, and yeah, I do all my own tractor work too, even now.
And do you use tractor? Not a I don't know what you call them. Those
like a track.
Like a cat, like a snow cat, because some vineyards are.
No, actually use a wheel tractor and
use a real tractor. That's got to be heart palpitating from time to time.
Yeah, I buckle up for dear life. Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen and show everybody a picture that's very cool that you took of the fog sitting over the lake, and you're up at 1,200 feet there, and here we are looking at the fog that comes off the lake, literally 1,000 feet below you. Talk about what this does to the terroir or the environment for growing the grapes.
Yeah, you know, that fog actually comes in through, it's from the ocean. It's not just from the lake. So it comes in and it fills in the whole Dry Creek Valley. And, you know, Lake Sonoma was formed by the dam that, you know, was put in there in Dry Creek. So it just kind of fills in. That's right about at about 1,000 feet in that picture. And it just gives you an idea about how we have not only have the elevation, we have the coastal influence, and they can fluctuate. Some days will be right in the middle of the fog, and some days will be above the fog, like right there. And it tends to be shallower towards the end of the season, like with harvest, so we can be a little bit drier up here, which is another positive for the grapes.
Yes, super interesting. Couple of other questions. Jack, do you follow the practice of no irrigation after grapevines have been 2 or 3 years in the ground, similar to Italy, Spain? At least one winery here in Washington, this is from Jan up in Washington, does that with one of their vineyards.
You know, it's a good question. I haven't gotten to that point. It's this year we kind of had to do that almost because there was so little water. But I do have a little bit of well water, and I try to give them. Mostly, it's just to put fertilizer on. It helps incorporate the fertilizer, but it's all drip irrigation, and it's very minimally, irrigated. And I don't get much yield. I get about 2 to 3 tons an acre. This year it was down as low as 1.8 tons an acre. So I do try to maintain that by a little bit of irrigation, but it's
yeah, and young vines and young vineyards with a lot, with sort of ideal kind of plant growing conditions will do as much as 5 or 6 tons an acre. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and I think the highest I've gotten is 3.5 or so, but it's a different it's a different program. You get more dollars per ton and less tons an acre, and it kind of hopefully works out just as well as the.
We lost your video there, Jack. You still there?
Yeah, I got a phone call.
Video for a second. Another question: does Rockpile go up to 1,900 feet at its highest?
It goes up even higher, a little bit over 2,000 feet, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, the old Rockpile Vineyard is over 2,000 feet.
One other question coming in. Where is Jack's wine available? Eddie, it's going to be available next year, and we showed, and we will show again, a URL. I'll actually put it in the chat, where you can go and put your name and email and stuff in, and you can send a note to Jack at florencevineyard.com. And I just put that link in the chat. So for anybody who wants to be on the pre-order list, just indicating an interest in these wines, hit that URL and send a message to Jack with your name and your contact information. So Jack, before we start doing the barrel tasting samples, what about your experience with the famous St. Peter's Church Vineyard and working with Ulysses Valdez, who's very well known also? What about that sort of informed where you've kind of come to the point you're at today?
Yeah, like I mentioned, the St. Peter's Church was really instrumental in terms of making Rockpile what it is. Ulysses is, I met him when he was 16 years old. He was just up from Mexico. My dad had a vineyard at Tri Creek at that time, and he showed up one day looking for a job, and we hit it off and became, best friends and worked together as partners for 17 years. And St. Peter's Church was just one of dozens of vineyards. We managed as many as 600 acres at one point. And, I like to say I taught him everything he knew about viticulture, but he was just a natural farmer and a quick learner. And he went on to make some incredible wines, doing what I'm just starting to do now in terms of making his own wine in the Russian River Valley area. Just an incredible person. It's a shame that he passed away a couple of years ago. But we had a great relationship. And the St. Peter's, like I said, the quality of that clone, just kind of bringing that up to Rockpile, really gave Rockpile the start that turned it into an appellation.
I only learned about Rockpile about a year ago, and when I first met Diane Wilson, and she sent me some sample bottles, and I was blown away. But I also just love the name Rockpile. It just sounds cool. It makes you curious, like what's going on with the Rockpile. You know, it's less run of the mill than, you know, Alexander Valley or Dry Creek or those. Nothing wrong with those names, but they're much more, you know, straight ahead. So speaking of Rockpile, how are the wines that you and other Rockpile wine producers make? How are they different and distinct? What is the signature or the calling card of a Rockpile wine versus a wine from the Dry Creek Valley or from the Central Coast or from Napa? Like what makes Rockpile different?
Yeah, you know, I've been told for this vineyard there's a certain mineral quality in the Zinfandels, and it's hard to put your finger on it until you've tasted it. It's almost this is from, I don't know if you know Jeff Cohn, another legendary winemaker, but he would used to say you can almost taste the soil in a good way in the wines themselves. But that's kind of a whimsical way of looking at it. But I think viticulturally it's just the more intensity. It's a little bit on Zinfandel, you know, tends to get big berry, big clusters sometimes. Up here, it's a smaller berry, smaller clusters, so you get a little bit more intensity in the wines. We'll see those characteristics in other high elevation appellations. But like I said, here at Rockpile, because it's all high elevation, you have a real consistency in the wines.
Cool. All right, two more images. Tell us what they are. Tell us what's happening in these, and then we will we'll taste these barrel samples. So this is what I've had behind me for the last little while. This is, I think, you know, this is earlier in the year. Tell us what's happening with these grapes.
Yeah, that's right after fruit set. That's right about in June, about the month of June. The clusters have set. They won't turn color for another month or so at that point, but that's kind of a mid season. You know, the vine you're showing there is a head prune vine, which is kind of iconic. People associate that with Zinfandel vineyards. I have that just on the end of the row, and everything else, as you kind of seen around me here, is on wires, which is kind of a newer way of doing it, but it's I think it's worked out real well for this vineyard. And
then we go to the end game, which is the harvest. And man, look at the color on these grapes. What time of year is this? And tell us what we're seeing in this picture.
Yeah, I harvest Zinfandel usually the first couple of weeks of September, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing there. It's a real challenge. You know, the fact that we talked about the steep terrain, harvest even more so because you have that heavy load, and it can be real dicey at times. You know, also the labor is a whole nother thing. I've been fortunate with that also. So yeah, that's just we were picking one of the lower blocks down towards the lake, and that was a couple years ago. Very cool, excellent.
All right, so let's should we dive into these barrel samples? You pulled these today, yeah?
Yeah, let's let me know if I'm going to try to get the wine and the camera here and all that. And I just picked these up today. Tried to do I asked the cellar master there to do like a little bit of the new oak and a little bit of neutral oak, because you get all one or all the other. You don't quite get the. This is Zinfandel 2020. Can you? Am I in the frame okay?
Yep.
So I haven't tasted these in several months, so it'll be fun for me too. I can already see it's got some great color. You know, Zin, one of the reasons I planted Petite was to do a little field blend, little blending afterwards if I had to, and I may not have to put much Petite in that. Very nice. Yeah, you know, this because the grapes get so ripe, we have just a great fruit forward wines. I think this got about 27 bricks when we harvested it.
So it's got the, in a good way, that jamminess to it.
Right, but it's not. You don't get I'm not getting the overripe. You know, one of the things that Rosenblum used to do is a lot of the real overripe raisiny almost. And since I've been with Wilson, they've kind of dialed that back a little bit, and we do a lot of harvest around 26, 27 before it gets overripe and maintains a little bit more complexity. And this is really nice. I'm really excited about this.
This is going to be your first vintage, right?
My first vintage, yeah.
This will be the very first Florence Vineyard wines. I just love this. We're this is history in the making here. I mean, people, everyone watching, this is the driving force behind the actual creation of an AVA. And these are his first wines. And by the way, the first like real wines that came out of his vineyard in 2003 were among the best in the world. So this is pretty cool. I'm excited. I don't know about you guys. By the way, that Nancy made a point about the color. The color is amazing. It's pretty much set though. It's not going to get any deeper than it is now, right?
Right. Although the finished product, we have, you can blend in a certain amount of Petite Sirah if you wanted to, and I have that. Wait to see the color on the Petite. Really very inky.
Yeah.
So that gives me the option if I wanted to put some, to firm it up a little bit on the Zin, I could do that. But that's something that I'll sit down with a winemaker and we'll talk about that. But this, I always kind of thought Petite doesn't have quite the following, but I always kind of thought it's kind of the crown jewel from this vineyard. It really makes some incredible, deep, inky. Yeah, that's really exciting. I think I can't be in a better position to be initial release wines of this caliber. This is just excellent. Just a inky mouthfeel, varietal Petite Sirah character. I put some new French oak in both of these, and you can pick up, that adds some complexity to it also.
Some new French oak.
Yeah, it's about 25% new French oak. And on these samples, we tried to estimate that by taking some one barrel and another barrel and mixing them together. But 25% new French oak. Altogether, I have 10 barrels of Zinfandel and 4 barrels of Petite Sirah. And
regular size barrel or the barriques?
They're regular barrels.
Regular barrels. So that'll be how many cases of each will you be making approximately?
I think is it I don't remember the conversion, but I'm looking at about 300 cases total.
Yeah, so it's a very small production. So anybody watching who really is a fan of these delicious, like full-bodied California red wines, get on the pre-order list. This is limited. This will be limited in scope. A couple of other questions came in. One was about the brix level, which for anybody watching, if you don't know what the brix is just a technical term that talks to what the sugar composition or content of the wine is. With these big California reds, you're going to have a relatively higher brix level for sugar. And the question was, doesn't the brix increase somewhat after you pick? Is that correct?
It does. Yeah, you get soak up. And I've been, just for example, we picked a couple of days ago, we finished up the Petite Sirah this year. And when I was down at the winery today, I checked on it and it was, it was 27.8 the day we picked it. And now it's up to 28.2. So it soaks up a little bit. And that soaking up is the sugar is being drawn out of the raisins as it sits there for a few days. So it'll peak about higher.
And these will both the Zinfandel and the Petite Sirah will be relatively high alcohol by volume. They'll be probably close to 15%. Yeah.
I would say, easily 15. I would think 15 and a half. My personal preference, would be up there around 16 or so, but I know that that's not, everybody's personal preference. So you got to kind of keep it in a little bit softer wines are a little bit more in vogue, it seems like these days. But yeah, it'll be about 15 to 16, 15 and a half.
Jack, I'm with you. I'm an old school California red Zin person, and if bring the brix, bring the alcohol by volume level. I love it because it's literally got just such boldness and character. They're huge wines, and
Yeah.
I love that. You can't pound them. They're not porch pounders. You got to go slow because they're powerful. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. Excellent. So what's the status? I'm sure some people are wondering, if I get on the pre-order list, are you keeping a sort of, in first come first served list of people who are expressing interest in the wines?
Yeah, I'll be starting the list today, actually, with you guys. I mean, all I have right now are just some family members, but I'll be starting the list, and then I haven't just, I'll be participating in ZAP in January, and I'll decide at that point if I'm going to sell futures or not. I just got my liquor license a couple of days ago, so if I don't start selling at ZAP, then well, you can't sell at ZAP, but as far as taking the list and then introducing futures later. But if I don't do it, then I'll be selling at release in July or so, or shortly after of next year. But yeah, I'll be tracking that and sending out reminders and so forth.
When for everybody watching, when Jack references ZAP, which is ZAP, just like it sounds, he's talking about the Zinfandel Experience event and festival, which happens in San Francisco in January. About 120 different California wineries that produce Zinfandel. Some of them are famous ones like Turley and Ridge and Sagazio and Ravenswood. And then some of them are like real boutique, amazing small producers like Florence Vineyard. If you're a red wine fan, and if you're a California wine fan, and you have not been to the Zinfandel Experience, or as some of us call it, ZAP, it's worth the trip. It's an amazing day. Well, Jack, this is very cool. Before we go, I want to ask the crowd watching if anybody has any questions about either of the wines or about the vineyard. I'm going to share my screen again. We have one more question here. What rootstock did you use? So this is a technical question. What rootstock did you use to plant the vineyard? And does that rootstock add anything to the grapes?
Yeah, great question. I used the 110R, and the reason for that is that it's a drought-tolerant, deep-rooted rootstock. So it enables me, these vines, the roots go down several feet or several in all directions, so they get what little water is there. In years like this year, it really makes a huge difference, and it enables me to put less water on over the course of the season, and you got kind of this natural progression. So yeah, that's the rootstock 110R.
Yeah, that's so I have a question, and it's somewhat impolitic, and I apologize in advance. Did you save the best grapes for your wines, Jack?
That's a great question too. It's actually, I had the option of doing that, and they were really nice in terms of the Wilsons and Antoine, my winemaker, and what I did do is just choose a block that I really always liked, and that way I could kind of track my wine to that block. But I try not to cherry pick in terms of that. There's several blocks that are really, really excellent, and then so no, I didn't. In a way, I did have a favorite block in terms of what I was liking in there. What I was it's kind of way far out of the way, but I guess I didn't really answer the question there, but a little bit, but I try not to do it too much.
Well, listen, it had to cross your mind. Like 90% of your business and your customers are people buying the grapes, and they need good product to make a good wine. So you can't leave them out to dry. Right. But at the same time, you want to have some of the good fruit for your own wine. Yeah, I mean that's a natural. And I'm sure there's so much good fruit on your property that it's not like you had to cherry pick that much to
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of it's really it's all really good. It's just some areas maybe a little better than others because it is hillside land. It's kind of these rolling hills, and some has northern exposure, some has southern. So there's little differences, and we'll see.
what's the most exciting thing to you about growing grapes and producing wine? That's a question in the chat.
The grape growing is I've never gotten tired of it because you're tied to the land and nature, and I've always been like a weather buff. And so just, and that brings up a whole nother thing, how in the old days when I first started, we worried about rain every year, and now we're worried about heat. We had a little bit of rain last month, and it was a good thing. So it's fun to kind of, it adds a little bit of tension to kind of live at Mother Nature's whims. The winemaking part is just carrying it through. I'm a connoisseur of wine like you guys. I love wine, and being able to see how what I do in the vineyard, how it affects the actual wine. I mean, it has changed my perspective entirely. I'm approaching it now as all my grapes as a winemaker would approach them, wanting the best possible quality and not just wanting to get them harvested and off the vineyard. So that's how I would answer the question. Yeah.
So your title has changed from farmer to farmer/winemaker.
Yeah, I think so. It's been an eye opener. I mean, this year I actually waited about a week later than I normally would have on the Petite Sirah just to get it totally fully ripe, and I think it'll make a difference.
We have another question from Lee. Did the St. Peter's Church Zin you used as a clone have anything to do with the St. Peter's Church Zin that was planted in 1852?
Yeah, that's the vineyard, as far as I know, unless there's another one. Your listener there has the date, the year, done his homework. I know it was in the late 1800s, and that's you can actually, if you're planting a vineyard today, you can actually go to a nursery and order St. Peter's clone Zinfandel. It's become that well known, and it's just a tiny little 2-acre vineyard, and at least it was when we started farming it back in back in the day, back in the 80s.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and Lee, your knowledge of the grapes is impressive. I knew this question was going to come up. I told you, Jack, that it would. But Susan asks a really good question. It's one that I have been in the back of my mind. Any problems with smoke from the wildfires?
That was in the back of my mind, in front of my mind, actually, when we decided to do this last year. And for a while, it looked like, it would have taken a miracle to make this happen. I was evacuated. The fires got very close. So I was just, and every time we taste it, and here again today, I knock on wood, but there's no smoke at all in the wine, at least that I can taste. It's so far it gets a clean bill of health, but it was very worrisome, and there are vineyards nearby that were smoke tainted. So it's I feel really fortunate that the wines have turned out as well as they have at this point. There's absolutely no detection of smoke.
You said the other day that that there was a bunch of the crop or the fruit from 2020 that either didn't get used to make wine or did, but then the wine wasn't really marketed or sold because of the concern about smoke. And it turned out that the smoke from 2020, which was really when it was quite bad in your area, ended up not being a problem. Is that right?
Well, that's a good question, Sam. I mean, whether it's a problem or not is somewhat subjective, I guess. I mean, you're able to test for smoke taint before harvesting. And the problem, what happened was the labs got so booked up, there'd be like 6-8 week delay in getting the results back. Meanwhile, you had to make a decision on harvesting. And a lot of wineries were very, very reluctant to harvest grapes they're paying a lot of money for that might turn out to be no good. So they would just reject out of hand or say, well, I think it's smoke tainted, we're not taking it. Fortunately, like I said, the Wilsons, great people, worked with me, took the grapes, and of course they turned out fine. So I can't say whether I know some vineyards that were not harvested at all, or most of the vineyard was not harvested. And it's hard to say, whether they were really tainted or was just over caution on the part of the winery. It could be one or the other.
Well, that's great news for Ken and Diane that at Wilson, they went ahead, they did it, and it ended up working out. The wine was good.
Yeah, and it looks like it's going to be a great vintage too. These two have some of the best color I've seen in a while, and it could be, although the 19 is also really good. So yeah, it could be a great vintage.
That's amazing to hear. Amazing to hear. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I love the fact that we did this with you in the vineyard, literally. We heard the wind a little bit in the background, and we got to pan around and see the surrounding area. And it is such a privilege to talk with somebody who was so instrumental in the creation of a whole new zone or AVA appellation in California. And the wines are, if you haven't had a Rockpile wine, try one. There's a number of great wineries that make them. Jack's making his own now, and it's a wonderful place. So thank you, and thank you everyone for tuning in from all over. It's great to see lots of new faces and old as well. And we will see you guys next week. We're doing a special wine and chocolate pairing next week with Peconic Bay Vineyards on Long Island, which is making some spectacular wines with an unbelievable chocolatier who's originally from Spain, based on the east end of Long Island. So tune in next week. It'll be actually Thursday, the 14th of October. And otherwise, stay safe, everybody. Jack, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure was all ours. Thank you. We'll be in touch soon, and I'm going to put myself on the pre-order list. All right, guys. Safe home. Thank you, everybody.